I'm Nadia Gurwell.
I'm John Guglieltino.
I'm Michelle Blanchard. Welcome to 30 Minutes.
Welcome to 30 Minutes. My name is John Guglieltino, and I'm your host. I want to welcome you on the show.
How are you, John?
Okay.
Good.
And you had a good trip down. For people that don't know you or just know you, a little bit, if you can give us a little background on yourself. I know that you work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but your educational background, family, if you like, a little bit on that. Okay.
I'm running for Attorney General.
Okay, Attorney General.
And I'm originally from Windsor, Connecticut. I grew up in Windsor.
Windsor, okay.
I live in Hartford now with my wife, Joy. We have 3 boys, James, Everett, and Gabriel, age 6, 4, and 2. I lived almost my entire life in Connecticut, apart from a couple years after college. I went to college at Georgetown University, UConn Law School, graduated from UConn Law School 2005, and I've spent most of my legal career at the United States Attorney's Office, where I was the chief of the Financial Fraud and Public Corruption Unit, supervised some of the best attorneys in the country, some of the best legal staff in the country, going after public corruption in our state.
And you had a role in the John Rowland episode.
That's right. Yep.
Yes.
I supervised the prosecution of John Rowland, and then I tried the case against him with another assistant United States attorney. That's right.
Okay. Very good. How did you come up with the idea of going for Attorney General?
Well, I left the Justice Department about 2 years ago,
Okay.
and I've never run for office before. I had held public office as a prosecutor, and hadn't really thought that politics was in my future. In some ways, I'd seen the ugly side of politics, prosecuting corruption and misconduct in government. But I come to believe that we're at a point in our politics now where so many people feel forgotten and left behind by a political system that they think isn't responsive to their needs. They've seen corruption, but they've also seen a political class that seems increasingly focused on just the concerns of a very narrow set of people. And so I think we need people in public life who may not have spent years and years and years in politics, but have spent their lives working for the public good so that they can be a voice for people who really need it. And that's why I'm running for Attorney General.
Right. Now, you had a background as a teacher and a union organizer in the past that helped you along your path, or was that just a learning, a place where you sort of learned?
Yeah, I got to say that before I went to law school, my experience teaching and working with healthcare workers, those are really the experiences that convinced me I should go to law school. So when I graduated from college, I thought I was going to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to do with my life, and I moved out to northern Arizona on the Navajo Reservation to teach high school English. And I was working in one of the most impoverished corners of the country, as you might imagine. The children that I was working with, many of them came to school hungry. Many of them came to school having experienced trauma at home because they'd witnessed substance abuse at home or domestic violence. I mean, I had kids in the 9th grade who couldn't even write their own name. And what became clear to me was that most of the challenges that these kids had stemmed from just deep intergenerational poverty. And so I became very engaged in matters of social and economic justice, and I became a union organizer for low-wage healthcare workers in California, almost all of whom were women, almost all of whom were first-generation American. And I was put in charge of an investigation into violations of California labor laws at these hospitals because the women that we were trying to organize were being forced to work off the clock. What that means is that for a couple hours a day, they'd work without pay. And so my job was to meet with these folks in their homes in the evenings to try and get them to tell me their stories, partly because we were trying to organize them, but partly because we were trying to build the basis for a class action lawsuit. And I didn't really even know what that was. But that's when I first thought that being a lawyer was something that I could do to really help people and give people a voice who didn't have one.
You have a little more of a input as opposed to other professions.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there who are wealthy and powerful and have all the legal assistance that money can buy, and that's fine.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of people out there who
The little guys.
yeah, who don't have anybody sticking up for them, and in some cases wouldn't even know where to find a lawyer. And those are the people that really need help.
Yeah, it's our attorney generals here in the state of Connecticut have always been proactive. You know, you got Dick Blumenthal and all the things he did, the tobacco cases, and there were the drug companies. There was a number of different of settlements that he's made for the little guy, and it also was good with the fines that were picked up on the state or the multiple states got fines because of the fraud that was involved.
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
we actually have been blessed in Connecticut with 2 attorney generals
George.
recently,
Yeah.
who have really made that office one that worked for average people. So one of the interesting things about Senator Blumenthal is that he came out of the U.S. Attorney's Office too. He was originally a prosecutor, and part of what I believe is that right now you really need a prosecutor's attitude if you're going to be leading that office and conducting multi-state investigations, which is really what a lot of the work is now. You talk about the tobacco settlement, that has resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue to the state of Connecticut. George Jepson right now is leading an investigation into price fixing in the generic drug market, so we can bring down prices for people who are already struggling with the price of prescription drugs.
People are always saying, why are drugs so high?
Yeah.
Well, they were fixing prices. That's why.
And there's very little transparency around how those prices are set. In fact, there's some legislation being introduced in the Connecticut General Assembly this session by Comptroller Kevin Lembo and State Representative Sean Scanlon, designed to kind of pull back the curtain on how drug companies price their drugs, because they are escalating every single day, and part of it is because of the collusion that you're talking about. And it's illegal and it's wrong.
Yeah, and unless their feet are put to the fire, they'll just keep it up.
That's right.
So the public good, people complaining, hey, I can't afford this. Hey, it's because they're fixing prices, and it all flows up the chain as opposed to staying in your pocket as a consumer at the local level.
Well, that's right. And a lot of these drugs, they're life-saving drugs. They may mean the difference between life and death, but they mean the difference between a tolerable quality of life and pain and agony that people have a hard time living through. And the idea that pharmaceutical companies would be jacking these prices and making it difficult on people just so they can show profits to their shareholders is unconscionable. And one of the things that I'd like to see is a anti-gouging law, so that if the Attorney General in Connecticut believed that there were price increases that were unconscionable and unexplained, that we could go after them.
You can claw
That's
back
right.
some of those monies, Are there any other things that you'd like to pursue? I believe I saw something about Trump that some of the things that he's done that are question marks as to whether or not that's in our interest as a state.
Yeah.
I might have doubts on a constitutional basis.
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely living in a different era now,
Right.
With the Trump presidency. And attorneys general across the country are actually being called upon to take the Trump administration and the federal government to court because they're doing things that are really unprecedented. And let me just give you a couple of examples. The first thing that Donald Trump tried to do when he took office was ban people from the United States based on their religious faith. That's not me saying that. That's several courts that reviewed it and determined that it was unconstitutional. The reason that was stopped in its tracks is because the Democratic Attorney General in the state of Washington took him to court. The same is true on other areas, like, for example, the Dreamers, kids who came here brought by their parents when they were young, undocumented, have lived their entire lives in the United States. We have about 10,000 of them in Connecticut who are fully Connecticut residents, are contributing to our society, and may be at risk of deportation to a country they have no relationship with.
If they've been here from age 2 and they're age 30,
That's right.
They don't know any other country.
Oh, no, and they're Americans in every sense of the word, but in terms of documentation. And so that's another area where we're going to need an attorney general who can go to court and defend them. One of the issues recently that's arisen in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting, turns on gun safety, and we've had very strong gun safety laws passed in Connecticut. But there is a bill in Congress right now called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act that would basically allow anybody from another state,
Yeah,
which
if you-
has lax gun laws,
If you have from Utah, the way I understand it, and you come into Connecticut, well, you got a law that says that you can carry a concealed weapon from another state, and Connecticut laws don't apply to him.
That's right.
what they're trying to
Right.
pass.
There may be no training requirements in Utah. There may be no application requirements. There may be no meaningful background requirements. And so long as you're compliant with Utah law, you can come into Connecticut and do whatever the heck you want. That is a piece of legislation which, if it's passed, the Connecticut Attorney General, and certainly I will if I'm that person, I'll be the first in court challenging it, because that goes to the public health and safety of Connecticut residents. So there's going to be a lot of litigation in federal court around that. And one of the reasons that I'm running for Attorney General is because, you know, I've spent years supervising lawyers going into federal court and fighting for the public interest. I think that's what we need now.
Right. So, are there any other areas that you've been looking at? You know, we talked about the tobacco settlement. We talked about the price fixing on drugs. Is there something along
Yeah.
that line that might be?
Well, yes. I mean, part of what we need to do is continue the litigation that George has started. We also, though, are faced with a situation now where the Trump administration has dropped environmental protection actions
That's
by
true.
more than 50%. And that's something that matters a lot in the western part of the state here.
You can't enforce the laws that are on the books that you got to have clean air, clean water, or whatever, if they've cut the funding off.
That's right. Or
So-
worse, they've
yeah.
decided that they're just not going to enforce the law for ideological reasons. And so, you know, particularly in the western part of the state where natural beauty, environmental protection is something that gives this part of the state its character,
Right.
you know, we need to be stepping up enforcement against polluters here if in the absence of federal action. I'll give you a couple more examples. You know, we have in the eastern part of the state, and I don't know how much your viewers may be aware of this, but there's a crumbling home foundations crisis where up to 30,000 homes may be resting on defective concrete. And homeowners out there,
That's been in the news,
yeah,
but you know,
they're struggling, and part of the reason they're struggling is because insurance companies
don't cover that.
well, they did originally,
Yeah.
and then once the insurance companies became aware of this problem, they wrote it out of their coverage without much notice to homeowners. So, you know, that's an area where the Attorney General can really be a voice for people who need it. And then, you know, it's hard to know, you know, what's coming down the pike, but we know that we're living in an era of where our private and personal information is spread all over the world through the internet. So making sure that people's personal identities and data is protected,
Aren't stolen.
and aren't stolen, and aren't shared unlawfully between companies is going to be very, very important. And that's something that I actually worked on as a prosecutor and that I'd want to pursue as Attorney General.
So would you work in conjunction with other state attorney generals to go after some of this sharing that goes on? It seems to be pervasive that there's a lot of sharing between like-minded companies. you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, just, you know,
Credit bureaus, for example, you know, I mean, you know, even to the point that they had to breach at one of them, and
right.
you know, a lot of information is out there because of that breach, and then they have no, they're not even apologetic about it.
You know, I probably get on my personal cell phone 5-6 calls a day from numbers that I now know are calling me as telemarketers or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And the only way to really kind of address that from an industry perspective is if you have a national coalition of attorneys general going after it. That's the way to bring industry reform. It's also how we get the biggest settlements for the state of Connecticut. So that is increasingly, you know, the model that state attorneys general need to pursue. It's something that I did at the U.S. Attorney's Office. You know, one of the investigations that I'm most proud of was an investigation into the way in which residential mortgage-backed securities were traded in the aftermath of the financial crisis. And because of the hard work of some very smart, very aggressive prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut, we brought cases that reformed that entire industry, working with jurisdictions around the country. That's the kind of work that we need to be doing at the Attorney General's office.
That's good. Now, what does the Attorney General do when he's not pursuing major cases. Is it sort of something along this line, and you could fill in the blanks if I'm going to miss a good chunk of it, but if legislation's being considered by the House or the Senate here in Connecticut, or the governor's thinking of proposing legislation, do they sort of like run it by you as if or one of your associates that's if this is legal, how could they word this a little bit better? Isn't that part of the function of the Attorney General's office?
That's right. Yeah, part of what the Attorney General's office does is provide legal advice to the governor and the legislature about legislation that may be under consideration, what the legal implications of what they're doing may be. For example, is what they're doing lawful? Could it expose the state to litigation? That's an important part of the job. And then the daily yeoman's work of the Attorney General's office is defending the state from suit. So every day, different agencies associated with the state of Connecticut are sued by litigants, and it's the Attorney General's job to defend the state and to defend the interests of Connecticut residents in that litigation. So that's an important part of the job as well. And then, as you mentioned, there's the affirmative litigation side, where the Attorney General's office is really going after bad actors to protect the public. That's the part of the job that gets the most attention.
Right.
In this day and age, it's the part of the job that's most important because, as I said earlier, the Attorney General is really the lawyer for everybody out there who doesn't have one. But the lion's share of the staff attorneys at the Attorney General's office kind of work every day in obscurity, defending the state and doing the people's work, and their work is critical and needs to be respected. And one of the things I hope to do as Attorney General, and that I think George Jepsen has done a very good job of, is continue to give credit to the line attorneys general who come to work every day for the work that they do, and make sure that the Attorney General's office is one where people like coming to work, feel that they're doing the public's good. And I think that's important.
Okay. Do the towns and cities also come by way maybe of their corporation councils? Sometimes you may have a selectman that calls you directly on local issues and how that connects with the state. Is that another function of the Attorney General's office, that they're proposing an ordinance and they don't want to be in conflict with the state law? Isn't that another example of the service that the Attorney General does?
Well, that's right, yeah. So typically a town or a city's corporation council, as you mentioned, would contact the Attorney General's office to work through any open legal questions about an ordinance that a municipality may be considering. The Attorney General's office also takes citizen complaints and complaints from mayors or first selectmen who may be having an issue with a company in their town or some other issue. And so part of what the Attorney General's office does is respond to citizen complaints. And so one thing I hope to do as Attorney General is make sure that we're doing that effectively, efficiently, getting back to people. And also for small businesses, for example, that may be the subject of a complaint, make sure that we're working through that review quickly so we can resolve any issues and let them get back to doing their business without them being tied up in an investigation unnecessarily for a lengthy period of time.
Well, I'm thinking of it. Do you have a website and a telephone number that you could share with our viewers?
Yes, we do. So the website for our campaign is www.mattei4ct. It's an Italian last name, so it's mattei4ct.com. And our campaign phone is 860-428-1737. And there's a sign-in on our website if you want to give us your information so that we can be in touch with you. We'd love for that. We're trying to really build a grassroots campaign. As I mentioned to you before, I've never run for public office before.
Oh, okay.
Getting to 169 towns and getting known, which we've done. We've been to over 100. Is a real undertaking, and so we want to connect with as many people as we can.
You got another month or so, right?
Yeah, well, we got 2 months to the convention. We got, maybe 6 months to the primary, and then the general election's in November. So, yeah, we're more than halfway there. That's what I tell my wife.
You should press it. When's this over?
Yeah, right. Sometimes I ask myself that.
Now, is there, like you said, I think you mentioned before, individuals can contact you, but also groups can contact you if there's an issue, whether it be just excuse the groups that I may not mention, but I want to just make a point. Let's say the Moose Lodge wants to,
Yeah.
you know, inquire about something having to do with the lake they're adjacent to, you know, they just, you know, they want to know whether or not they might be breaking a law or whatever. You welcome those kind of calls also.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know, if they're going to do something with the water, is it your job? Is it the Environmental Protection Agency? What laws apply to whatever activity that they're, you know, so a group can also come to you. It doesn't have to come from a town.
Yeah, I think the Attorney General's office is very much a customer service organization, and so if an organization like the Moose Lodge, you know, has a question about, let's say, kind of use of the water around their facility, they could call the Attorney General's office, and if the Attorney General's office isn't the right agency to answer their question,
You'll direct
we
them
should
to
be
the
able to
right
direct them to
agency.
the right one. I mean, that's part of the problem has been, and this isn't specific to the Attorney General's office, but you know, people do feel disconnected from their government, and part of what we need to do to restore trust and confidence in the government's ability to be an instrument for good in people's lives is to be responsive, to be transparent, and to get people believing that, you know, the government is capable of doing things that really make a difference. I mean, you know, I believe that government does things that no one person can do alone. Take the environment, for example. You know, no individual, no company has a profit incentive in keeping our water clean and our air clean, making sure that our toys are safe for our kids to play with. You know, that's something that only government can do by people coming together and making it so. And so that means government officials need to conduct themselves in a way that's honorable, with integrity, and so that people can trust them.
Yeah, so that people feel like, hey, they're working for us.
That's right.
You know, then you have more a better feeling about government as opposed to some of the negative that's out there.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. We're getting down to like our last several minutes, and they'll tell me in a minute how long, if we've got 4 minutes left or whatever. Basically, you might want to say your website one more time and telephone. Again,
Okay.
one more time.
Again, the website.
And slow, because there's people that might be half asleep that.
I hope they're not asleep by now. But so it's Mattei4CT.com. MATTEI 4CT.com. And the number is 860-428-1737. I hope people get in touch with us.
All right, very good. We've got about 4 minutes. So let's go over, is there anything specific that you really like to get going on? You know, that's your pet peeve or the thing that you want to accomplish the most in your first 4 years?
Well, I would say that if we can fight back against the most significant legal overreaches of the Trump administration and defend people in Connecticut from that, whether it be our immigrant communities, whether it be keeping our communities safe by making sure that Connecticut's gun safety laws are respected, you know, the environment, net neutrality, which is an issue we didn't touch upon. You know, right now, people can get online and they don't have to pay to go to a particular website.
Right.
No internet service provider is deciding what content they can and can't see. That's at risk. So if we can continue to make sure that we're being vigilant in protecting Connecticut, then that would be successful. If we are engaged in high-level litigation against the pharmaceutical companies and continuing the work that George Jepsen has done, data privacy companies, and making sure that we're getting money back that Connecticut is owed so we can do our part to help with Connecticut's deficit problem, then we will have been successful. And if the Attorney General's office is looked upon by the people of Connecticut as their voice, somebody that they can trust, somebody that they know is waking up every morning thinking about them and their families, then we will have been successful. And that's what I hope to be as Connecticut's Attorney General.
Okay. Are there any environmental, well, that's right, that's part of the Trump
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. We were in Waterbury yesterday,
Yeah.
okay? In January, about 6,000 gallons of hydraulic oil spilled into the Naugatuck River from a plant in Waterbury. because of a defective valve. Now, we don't know what the environmental impacts of that will be. We weren't able to get there in time to capture most of the oil. Most of it flowed down the Naugatuck River into Long Island Sound. It affects Derby, that affects Stratford, that affects every town along the Naugatuck River. So I say that because in the absence of an Environmental Protection Agency that's not doing its job, that means we in Connecticut at DEEP, the Department of Environmental and Energy, and the Attorney General's office need to be staffing up to make sure that we're protecting communities. Now, DEEP has not finished its investigation there, but if that's a company that has had previous complaints, if that's a company that has a history of disregarding health and safety standards, well, then they need to be held accountable for that. And so that's an area where I think we need to be vigilant.
So what you're saying is the feds don't look like they're going to move because not big enough, and we don't really have to hit all of this stuff, and they've been downsized and had people laid off, and they're just not doing their job. So what you're saying, you would lead the charge.
We have to.
Because the citizens are being put at risk.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. I think
What else can I tell you?
Yeah. One more time on the website and the telephone number, since we got just about a minute left or so.
So the website again is Maddie for CT. The number's 860-428-1737. Let me just say to your audience, you know, I know we're in Danbury now, but this public access channel
it's Danbury, Richfield, and Bethel.
Reaches most of Western Connecticut. Yeah. You know, I think folks in this part of the state, just like every other part of the state, are going to have a real choice this election. You know, we have a number of folks who are stepping down. Governor Malloy is not running again. The Lieutenant Governor's not running again. The Attorney General's not running again. The Treasurer is not running again. And so we have a real chance to lift up a new generation of people in our state, a state that for a long time has had a political system that has been stale and a culture of incumbency.
They're telling me we're running out of time.
All right.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank the viewers for tuning in to 30 Minutes, and we'll see you next week, same time, same station.